I want to thank Minister Farrakhan for committing his church and his integrity and his credibility to this issue and not being scared of Big Pharma and the other forces that have tried to back us off. I want to thank Minister Tony Muhammad for taking up the weapon and being fearless about it and being eloquent about it and standing beside me all over this country to rally the American people against CNN and against ABC and NBC and the mainstream media. Not just the mainstream media, but the so-called alternate media, the supposed remedy for all this corporate-owned press, the Huffington Post, that will not publish a single article about this issue. Salon, Slate, Mother Jones, all of the alternative press that have pushed this issue out of the public square and muzzled the people who are trying to talk about vaccine safety. Here's the reason. The vaccine industry, the pharmaceutical industry, is $1 trillion industry. It gives more money to Congress than any other industry. The second biggest industry is the one I sue all the time, which is the oil industry. But pharma gives twice what the oil industry gives. Pharma gives 4 times what defense and aerospace give. So they own Congress. They own our legislatures. That's what Minister Tony said. When we start going down to Washington, D.C. and talking to these people, they're outraged, they're indignant. And then they go back to their office and they talk to their treasurer and their fundraisers and they say, oh, wait a second, that guy paid for your job. You can't go up against him. So in 1986, the pharmaceutical industry got something that every industry in this country would dream about, but none of them would ever hope that it actually might happen. They got Congress to pass a law that said it's illegal to sue a vaccine maker. No matter how reckless their behavior, no matter how negligent their conduct, no matter how grievous the injury that you suffer, no matter how poisonous the vaccine, you cannot bring them to court and sue them. What do you have to do to get a law like that passed? We have a 7th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and I'm going to quote it to you. It says, no American shall be deprived of the right of jury trial in controversies exceeding $25 in value. That's what the Constitution says. How can you pass a law that gets rid of all jury trials? Not only do you get rid of the jury trials, you get rid of the class action lawsuits, gone. The multi-district lawsuits, gone. The tort lawsuits, gone. The lawyers, gone. No depositions, no document searches, no discovery. You know how bad this industry behaves when they've got class action lawyers looking over their shoulders and U.S. attorneys ready to prosecute them. And you see a drug on television, 6 months later you see the lawyers on television saying, if you took that drug, call us up because we're going to make $1 billion for you. Because they were poisoning you and they knew it and we have the documents to show they knew it. So that's what they do when they've got somebody looking over their shoulder. What do you think they're going to do when they've got nobody looking over their shoulder? How can anybody imagine that what they're doing is safe? So in 1986, they got what everybody wanted, every industry in this country wanted, complete immunity from lawsuits. And suddenly, vaccines became pay dirt. When I was a little boy, a company that made the 3 vaccines that I took, it was like a civic duty. They were doing it to be good people, as PR, because nobody was making money on it. But suddenly, in 1986 and 87 and 88, it became immensely profitable. Why? Because suddenly you have a product. Imagine this. You have a product, you have the federal government ordering 200 million people to buy it, or they can't go to send their kids to school. There's no marketing cost, there's no advertising cost, and there's no liability. No matter what kind of poison you put out there in the marketplace, nobody can sue you, nobody can touch you. So if you could persuade CDC to put your vaccine on that mandatory schedule, your vaccine typically was worth $1 billion in profit to your company every year. So there was a scramble to put all these new vaccines onto the schedule. And the ones that were most profitable were the first ones to get on, like hepatitis B, most profitable vaccine in history. You got to take 4 of them. Each one costs $150, $300. Now you're ordering these people to buy them. They have no choice. It used to be they just gave hepatitis B to children whose mother had hepatitis B. Because you can't really the only way realistically you can get a hepatitis B is from unprotected sex with like a really seasoned partner, or from unprotected or from intravenous drug use. Why would you give that to a 3-hour-old baby? Unless the mother has it, and that's what they did before. They just gave it to the baby if the mother had it. But it was so profitable that they couldn't resist. So they made it mandatory for all of us. And every shot of that hepatitis B had 25 micrograms of mercury in it. You would have to weigh thousands of pounds to be able to take a shot with that much mercury and still comply with federal safety standards. But they were giving it to 6-pound babies, 4-pound babies, 2-pound babies, and 9-pound babies. It is criminal. But that's not all. They put all those vaccines on the schedule. You would hope, knowing this, that how much profit is involved, how much money pressure, you would hope that the people who are in that branch of CDC, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, this is the little branch that decides which new vaccines get on the schedule, you would hope that those people would be kind of nerdy, geeky scientists who are narrowly focused on public health outcomes. That's all they care about, public health. That's all they care about. They don't even go out at night. They just care about public health. That's not who they are. They don't even work for CDC. CDC chooses them from people recommended by the vaccine industry. So let me give you an example. In 1989, Paul Offit, who's like the Lex Luthor of vaccines, and he sits in a chair at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that is paid for by Merck, a $1.5 million grant from Merck. So he is already a toady of Merck's. And he was allowed to sit on the committee that approved the rotavirus vaccine. He owned the patent to the rotavirus vaccine. He then, and he didn't recuse himself, he voted to add it to the schedule. Once he got on that schedule, it was worth billions of dollars, and he sold his patent for $182 million. So this was a little bit of a scandal, and the Inspector General of HHS went to investigate it, and what they found is, they said, this is horrible, it's catastrophic, it shouldn't be happening, but guess what? It's completely legal under CDC's rules. They said not only that, but it's not just Paul Offit. Up to 97% of the people who sit on that committee have the same kind of conflicts as Paul Offit does. So how can the American people be certain that the vaccines that we are giving to our children are being given solely because the CDC cares about public health? There's another division of CDC, and the other division is the Office of Immunization Safety, and that's where the scientists are. There's like 30 scientists who, their job is to determine the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines. So they do the science, and I am comfortable reading science. I've been reading science my whole life. I brought over 500 lawsuits. Almost all of them have scientific controversy. So I actually was reading the science, and I saw that the science, and I know how to recognize tobacco science by what we call biostitutes, which are the phony scientists that are paid for by industry. And I could tell that the science they were creating was phony, fraudulent science. One of the signals was the only kind of science that they create are called epidemiological studies. They should be doing animal studies where you inject the animal with the vaccine and and then look what happens to his brain. They don't do that. They should be doing toxicological studies, petri dishes, where you take brain tissue and put the mercury on the brain tissue and see what happens. They won't do that. The only thing they'll do is epidemiological studies. An epidemiological study is a population study. So you look at a population that has been exposed. Some people have been exposed to the mercury, some haven't, and then you look at the outcomes. You see who gets sick and who doesn't, and then you keep track of that and do the math. Well, it sounds simple, but you can design an epidemiological study to say anything you want. Let me give you an example. You could design an epidemiological study to prove that sex does not make you pregnant. How would you do that? You would get rid of all the pregnant people before you did the study. That's called an exclusion. You get rid of them all, then you study the same population. You see a lot of people having sex, but nobody's getting pregnant. So you have proven that sex doesn't make you pregnant. Well, that's what they did. They took these populations and they got rid of all the autistic kids before they studied them. They got rid of all the neurological disorders before they studied them. They got all of the low IQs, any IQ below 70, before they studied them. And they studied them and they said, oh, these guys got a lot of mercury, but nothing happened to them. Why? Because half the people they started with had been excluded. Literally half the people they would get rid of, because those were the people who got sick and they got rid of them in advance. So we saw that they were cheating, and we knew it, but it's impossible to explain this to a reporter because they don't have more than 20 seconds to hear your story, and they just say, are you pro-vax or anti-vax? That's all we want to know. Pro-vax or anti-vax. We got to put you in one of those categories.